Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We are on Zoom, so we'll be continuing. I'm Jane Ash. I'm a member of the Orient or Oyster Pond, along with Mary Goodwin. And we put this together to help residents prepare, respond, recover from emergency situations that happen. I want to also thank the Orient Association for hosting this today. And we have Barbara Friedman, the president, and we have Chris Wedge also here. And I think anybody else from the Orient Association? Right. And Tony Ash, my wonderful husband, thank you. He's running the IT. He's treasurer. So I'm also going to see what we're trying to do today is to help. I'm a retired coordinator for the Office of Emergency Management for a town in Warren, New Jersey. I have about 22 years in that. I'm also EMS emergency management. And I am a trained Red Cross shelter coordinator. And the reason I say all that is a little bit about the importance of being prepared and responding. So that's why we're here. I want to say something about the weakest link in any kind of emergency event is usually communication. And so a couple, like last fall, we put out a list of notification communications about radio stations that you all should have information for in case of hurricane. And we'll put that out in But what we're going to be using in Orient, and I want to thank the Orient Association for this, your email. So if you're not on it, you should be getting on it. Because when we get information from these wonderful people, that's what I'm going to be putting out to you. It is the email, and we'll get this out in information on public, OrientAssociation.org. Is that correct? You do not have to belong to the Orient Association. So it's a wonderful association. It's $15 membership. But you can be on the email list without being a member of the association. But I'm going to give a push join the Orient Association. We did work here. I want to also talk about the Orient Fire Department. We have work here. One of the we have a really highly trained, small volunteer, or a devoted, dedicated, or a fire department. Okay, I know they keep everything. The part of her job is to prepare so they can do their jobs. Also, you don't want to put their lives at risk. They cannot go out in the middle of a hurricane, 70, 80 miles per hour. So part of this is also the number one cause of death in a hurricane, the storm surge. So the temptation to tough it out while you're at home to say, oh boy, when is and I'm going to read a little bit. If you live in an identified flood zone, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today, or if you've had experience with water coming up in your car in a fast storm, you do not stay in your house for the medically or elderly, fragile, families with small children, or any power outages. And also, if you have a second house, then it's not going to be in the third area. If an evacuation order is issued by Southold Township, all those instructions. Still open evacuation center if need be, and shelters if need be, at Oyster Pond School, elementary school. That is our main shelter. The whole point of having also, we're working with Pocatuck Hall. We're working with, thank you, Pocatuck Hall to become an evacuation, like a charging center. So in case of a storm, they have a generator now. They can put the generator up, and you can come in, because that's again, communication. People are going to want Wi-Fi. They're going to want information. You'll be able to plug in your chargers and be able to charge your phones, et cetera, here. So without further ado, I think Don Fisher and Dan Goodwin, and we have Al Krupski here also, are going to do a little bit of talking about ways to prepare. All right, so if I may, got to know this gentleman the last year. He's indomitable. I'm very impressed with all that he does. Okay, so let me read, please.
Are you going to read that?
Yeah, I'm good. Well, you asked. You did it. I'm going to read it.
You asked for it.
Yeah, I did ask for it. You know. Okay. Mr. Donald Fisher began his 52-year avocation in emergency services by joining the Southold Fire Department in October 1972. As a protection engine company member, his interest in the rescue company and emergency medical services led him to serve 25 years as an EMT and advanced emergency medical technician. During his tenure in the fire service, he held the positions of training officer, captain, and assistant chief. For 22 years, Mr. Fisher served the East End and Suffolk County as a certified instructor coordinator for NYS EMT classes. He taught American Red Cross First Aid and CPR at the Plum Island Animal Disease Laboratory and in adult education programs at the Southold School District. Additionally, he worked as a Southold Town 911 public service dispatcher and fire department radio operator. In 1993, Don joined the Southold Town Emergency Management Committee as an emergency coordinator for communications. He leads our local amateur radio emergency services group and served as the 1995 West Hampton wildfires, the TWA Flight 800 disaster, the Y2K experience, and the September 11th, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center, as well as numerous hurricane call-ups over the past 31 years. Since 2013, Mr. Fisher has served in this emergency management subcommittee for shelter operations at the town of Southold. So thank you for coming. We're going to let Don go first.
Wait a minute, Mary's got a question.
Very impressive.
Oh, my goodness.
So Don's going to speak first, and then I get to read Dan's. And Al, I don't have yours, but you'll have to introduce yourself. You know. Okay. so.
Oh, you left back to the 1983. The resume.
Smartest decision.
Al's my brother.
So Don's going to go first, and then we're going to save any questions for the very end. Don.
Thank you. I really. Yep.
Hook me up, Tony. I really didn't think Jane was going to read that thing this morning, but we all have to have a little curriculum vitae, and that's mine from a volunteer standpoint here on the North Fork and all around Suffolk County, actually. I did a program here in October, and some of you were here. We did it in the morning, and then we did it again in the evening, and that's where I really got into the weeds about preparation and awareness and your community here and your concerns. Talked about the flooding of the causeway and things like that. Well, I'm not going to repeat that here. I am giving that program up and down the North Fork throughout the summer. And if anyone's here who didn't catch that, you can see it in the paper, and you're welcome to come anywhere in the town of Southold and catch that program. It's a precursor to a 5-hour class on how to become a shelter volunteer. So you're going to hear a lot about emergency management throughout the year. Al and the current town board administration has really been spending a lot of time since January on preparation and our emergency management committee. So you'll hear about it. You're always welcome to come anywhere that I'm talking. Love to have you. What I'd like to talk about for a few minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the gang. How did we get here? How did this emergency management committee, Office of Emergency Management, places like New York City, we hear emergency management? Well, it all kind of started after World War II. As the Cold War began, and we had a real concern of nuclear threats of the Russians throwing bombs at us and we throwing bombs at them. After the war, we had all of these service people who had come out from fighting the war and had a very high level of preparedness from being in the field, from running logistics, from running the war. And now we're faced with a Cold War where you're not necessarily going to go out with bayonets, but they're going to throw a missile at you, or they're going to come overhead and drop a bomb on you. What the government of our country did was, we're going to put together civil defense. And some of us here may be old enough to remember the old round blue disc with the white triangle and red CD in the center. We don't see that very often. I got it on the back of my truck because I'm kind of like a historian. So I still use it. Today we've got FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration. And they got a very fancy logo. As an old guy, I still like the old civil defense because that's our history. The government created civil defense for the entire 50 states. Each county in New York State became the nucleus, the organization for civil defense through, for us in Suffolk County, our 10 towns, including Southold. And each township was encouraged by the county, from the Fed in the state, to create a team of people. And many of them were World War II veterans. So they came with certain knowledge to create teams of people that could augment our volunteer fire departments. Then, as today, our volunteer fire departments, and there are 7 departments in our township, they are our first go-to in any type of emergency. Whether you've got a medical problem and you need to be taken to the hospital, or whether we've got a major conflagration downtown Greenport, 4 or 5 buildings burning. And that's happened. I've been there. We depend on our fire departments to make those rescues to save us. Well, after the war, the fire departments, certainly, as important as they were, they didn't have all of the materials and resources and equipment that we have today. So these civil defense groups, think of them as rescue squads, were put together with the idea that they would augment your fire departments so that after the bomb went off, not only were your fire departments and your police and your military people coming in, but your civil defense, your volunteers from your community could come and help extricate people from buildings that had been caved in, do first aid, help the firemen fight fires as necessary. And I'm happy to say Southold Town stepped up to that in the 1950s. And folks by the name of Schriefers had a big barn right across from where the firehouse is now. Still there. I think it's Chuck E. King's barn now, or the big red barn you see right over there by the firehouse. The volunteers in Southold Town had a rescue truck. They had a station wagon. And the Schriefers used to maintain it, and they kept the equipment in the barn. I believe, I don't have any pictures of it, they got a surplus duck from the military. When we talk about the causeway, and if it's flooded over and you have to go to the hospital, as far back as the early 50s, the Orient community, your community, and the town had an amphibious vehicle. They could run it down the road, pick you up, go to the end of a street and pop out into the bay here and move you to Greenport if the causeway was covered. Those ducks were very hard to maintain, I can tell you. They used to leak, but at that time, a lot of guys from World War II, they knew how to take care of them. We had one. It was white and blue. I remember seeing it in parades as a little kid. Long gone now. Those are the rescue truck. So is the station wagon that the Schriefers used to drive around and the team used to use. But Southold Town had what we call today emergency management back in the 1950s. We had volunteers. We're looking for volunteers again today. Not so much in our emergency management plan to go out and fight fires. That's the fire department. to perform rescues. That's the fire department. If you are so inclined, I urge you to join your fire department. You can still help regardless of your age, and you're going to help your community and yourself. The things that you will learn in training can save your own life, as well as your family members. But if not the fire department, if not being an EMT, if not being a firefighter, I invite you on May 18th to come here in the morning at 9 o'clock and consider being a volunteer the few times over 5 or 6 years that we may call on you to help us at the Orient School if we have to open up a shelter for the hurricane or winter storm or disaster. We don't want to call on the fire department to put their resources into that. We want to be hosts to our community, to our family, to our friends, the people that we know. If they have to get out of their house, we need someplace that's safe for them to go to and shelter. So on May 18th, we're going to have a program. We're going to start here in the morning. We'll all break for lunch, and then after lunch, we're going to go to the school, and we're all going to get an opportunity to see how to set up the schoolrooms to welcome in ourselves and our neighbors, and how to be good hosts and take care of them for the short period of time, hopefully, that we need to shelter them away. You will be carrying on the tradition of the Schriefers and all of the other people here in Orient, East Marion, and throughout the town with civil defense. So that's my invitation. That's our history. We've been around for many, many years. Civil defense, now Homeland Security, and Federal Emergency Management Administration. And our town emergency manager is our supervisor, Al Kripsky. And I'm going to turn the floor over to them and to Dan, our superintendent of highways. Jane, take it away.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll take questions. We'll take questions after we.
I'm going to
Chat.
untrim this.
Yep.
My husband is saying I need to.
Yeah, we got to get the next person.
Okay, and then I'll give this over to you, Dean. It is my pleasure to introduce, and I'm going to need my glasses, Daniel Goodwin is a lifelong resident of Cutchogue, where he lives with his wife, Kristen, son, Hunter, and daughter, Maeve. Upon graduating from Mattituck High School in 2006, Daniel completed a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and returned home to be employed by Miller Environmental Group, a locally headquartered leading environmental services company with a national footprint. Daniel worked through the ranks in the company over his term of employment, where ultimately he held the title of branch manager of the Long Island, New York City Metro Operations Centers. He was responsible for projects from inception to completion while managing all aspects, including personnel, budgeting, field operations, and final reporting. Over the course of 10 plus years with this company, Daniel has worked on a vast array of private and public sector projects in the renewable energy, industrial services, capital improvement, and emergency response fields, servicing a wide variety of customers, including but not limited to private property owners, government and regulatory agencies, law enforcement, transportation companies, power generation plants, and major utility companies in the tri-state area. In 2021, Daniel had a successful campaign for Southold Town Superintendent of Highways, the position he currently holds. Since taking office in January of 2022, he has put his engineering education and background, immense experience in infrastructure work, construction, and skills honed as an emergency responder to man-made and natural disasters on the highway department, to the highway department. Dan, thank you so much for coming. And let me just hand this over to you.
Just want to say good morning. Thank you to everybody for coming out. It's my pleasure to come out and kind of talk to you guys, about some hyper local specific issues to Orient that we sort of face. Not going to sell you as hard as Don did. Just want to give you guys a little bit of information. Kind of, I get a lot of questions, a lot of phone calls in the highway department. And I think it's one thing I've been kind of trying to spread across town is what we actually do and what our responsibilities are. A lot of people just think, oh, you guys patch some roads up, you do some paving, maybe you do something with the wires, you do this, you do that. So I just kind of want to walk through a little bit of what we do and share some of the resources that we have. So Don sort of mentioned it, earlier, 7 fire districts, right? 7 fire districts in town. You start talking about the membership, of each of those districts and what that resource is and what that really means to the community. What's your membership out in Orient? Okay, so 37. Right. Right. So but still 20 active. Mattatuck, Cutchogue, some of those districts are upwards closer to 90 to 100. They have, unfortunately similar 2/3 active, something like that. But those are good numbers. Those are big numbers. We start talking about the highway department, for example. We have 35 employees, including myself and my deputy, and 2 secretarial staff. So we have 30 guys that are boots on the ground, able to go out and respond. So we're smaller than even one of the smallest fire districts in the town. So the fire districts are really a tremendous resource for the community. The one sales pitch I will give you is please join if you can. They need all the help and need active members. So the Southold Town Highway Network, we extend from Laurel to Orient. Orient unfortunately does not get to claim the title of easternmost hamlet because we also take care of Fisher's Island. So in that network, we have 400 lane miles of road. About 10 miles is out on Fisher's Island. We have 32 miles of sidewalk in our network, about 70% of which is along State Route 25, which the state was kind enough to grant to us for maintenance. Like I said before, 33 employees outside of myself and the deputy in the department, everything from heavy equipment operators, maintenance mechanics, auto mechanics, down to our secretarial staff in the office. And our total annual budget is just north of $8 million, including payroll, road paving, and everything else that we do. So some of the major tasks that everybody, kind of thinks of: snow and ice control. So that's your plowing, your salting, sanding operations. 12 sanding routes across town, 24 plow routes. It takes us 3 to 4 hours to treat the roads when we go out to do a sanding treatment. 4 to 6 hours to plow from the time that the snow has stopped falling. And as part of that, we erect over 8 miles of snow fence every fall in preparation for winters. So preparation, that's something that we'll keep bringing up today. That's very important. Big storms that just come up and pop up out of nowhere. Those are the ones that kind of concern me a little bit more than anything. The hurricanes, we're going to hear about them when they're spinning down Florida. There's this immense buildup. The storms that I see people, in my 2 years with the highway department getting into more trouble with are these ones that come out of nowhere. 3 weeks ago, we had a nor'easter that really did not hit the airwaves at all. It was going to be some rain, some wind, whatever it was. There was flooding in certain areas of town that was worse than Hurricane Sandy. And these are residents calling in to tell me this. Tremendous amount of wind damage, super saturated grounds, wind direction blowing in one direction, switching as the night went on. I mean, tremendous pine trees uprooting, coming across the road, taking down wires, hitting things. Those are the events that, from an emergency management standpoint, the big show is the hurricane. Those might come every, if we're lucky, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, whatever it may be. Part of our job as the emergency managers for the town, though, is to be prepared for anything that might come. It could be a winter storm. It could be a freak outage like that. It could be some, let's hope not, man-made disaster that happens that we need to have a call out for. So these are all things that we kind of have running in the background, almost at all times, just being prepared, that preparedness thing. Next major task that we handle is road paving and patching. We've implemented some new road type repairs, and this all kind of ties into our preparedness overall. Along with that, a big push that I've done in the last 2 years has been clearance trimming and removal of hazardous and potentially hazardous and dying trees. Trees block roads, trees rip down power wires, trees cut off access. That's, if somebody's having an issue and we need to get to them, the fire service needs to get to them. A tree in the road is a major obstacle that we have to deal with. There's some that, sure, you can drag it off of the road, you can cut it with a chainsaw. there's some trees there that you're going to be waiting for a payloader to come in and move this thing out of the road. And that's if it doesn't have wires down and entangled in it. So we've been putting, just in our normal day-to-day operations, a lot of work into preparing for these scenarios that we might see. I'm happy to say that from when I first took office 2 years ago, we would get a wind or a rainstorm, and we would have multiple call outs for even the most minor of windstorms. I'm talking a 20, 25 mile an hour wind. And I was like, what is going on here? So myself and my deputy, we started driving all of those 400 miles of road that we have and writing, notebook pages full. There's a tree at this address. There's this major dead branch. There's this issue. There's this issue. And then taking care of it ourselves. We're engaging our utility, PSCG, to come in and do the removal if it's near a wire and identify it as an issue for them. We have tried to do some of that along the state road as well. New York State is unfortunately not very responsive even to requests from the town. They seemingly would prefer to allow the trees to fall for whatever reason in the road rather than take care of them before they fall. But that's an uphill battle, but one that we're fighting nonetheless. Some other major tasks that we handle: road painting, sign maintenance, street sweeping, and then we get into the stormwater stuff. So mention rain events, flooding events, things of that nature. This is something I've put a major push on. I would say that stormwater related issues is the number one call that we still get to this day in my office, and we've stepped up our program as far as new installs, but also maintaining what we already have. So we have over 4,000 stormwater structures in our town inventory, some of which are beyond their useful life, some of which can be rehabilitated. We're working on those, and some of which are just not appropriate for the locations that they're in right now. Some of those ones that are not appropriate for the locations that they're in right now are ones where, we're dealing with rising sea levels and higher tides. They just don't work. They're in an area where you're a foot to groundwater. When they were installed, they were maybe 3 feet to groundwater. Groundwater's risen. We're in extremely wet periods now. Land subsiding below them, they've sank. So we're looking at alternate measures on how do we deal with stormwater. Is there something that we can do through a coastal resiliency program? You may have read in the newspaper that we're working on mapping flood areas, low-lying areas of concern. Spoke with a couple of you so far. What can we do to sort of get ahead of this and under these certain scenarios that we've seen, these small storms that we've dealt with? Where is this flooding? And what we've kind of really drilled down with is that the maps that are provided to us by state or federal government don't take into account some of the really hyperlocal issues that we face here. Lifelong resident, we obviously know we're getting a wind out of the east, it pushes that water up into our bays, and we're seeing that. And you see that coupled with a lunar tide or a moon tide, a high tide cycle that's already going to be abnormally high. The storm comes up the coast. That east wind drives that water in even further. That low tide cycle might go, that tide does not retreat. You get that next high tide push, and it pushes the water even further in. And then you have that lingering wind, and it just holds that water there. So what we've been doing is going around, and we know where these areas are. We're going out and mapping them precisely to, okay, it floods to this point, making a physical note of the conditions at that point. It was this storm on this tide at this time with this wind, and this was the condition that we were presented with. And we're working on comprehensively being able to communicate that to community, basically to say, look, if you live in one of these areas, you depend on this route under these conditions, under this type of storm, you might want to think about, what your plans are. What's your preparation? Because a category 1, category 2 coming up, it's not going to be any better. it's only going to get worse. But these are, like, I'll call it a baseline storm that we're dealing with. This is, I think I've had probably 6 or 7 storm of the centuries in 2 years. It's kind of tongue in cheek, but that seems to be what's going on now. We're dealing with fewer storms of higher intensity, shorter duration, They come through, it's a 24 to 36-hour event that we have to deal with, but we have to deal with it. We have to be prepared. There's going to be some areas where we're able to do something to alleviate it, raise the road, pitch the road in a certain way so that when the tide recedes, the water goes with it. And there's going to be areas where there's going to be interjurisdictional issues, town and state trying to work together, town and private trying to work together, town, private, and state trying to work together, county, So we're sort of going through that process now to identify, and then, it'll sort of be what's going to be the most bang for our buck, so to speak. Where can we make the biggest impact with, the lowest amount of resources expended, and start picking away at them from there. And some of these situations, the best resource is going to be communication, and communicating. These are the conditions you need to prepare for. There's very little that we can do. Just be aware, be ready. Speaking with Jane earlier, me and my family, we have prepared stuff ready to go. We have a couple totes in the basement, blankets, candles, some solid fuel tabs for heating stuff up, a little case of water, some basic medications and that stuff. And we have it ready to go 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, just in case. You never know. And my thought process is we have all this stuff in the house, but your mind doesn't need to be trying to chase down which closet it is, where is it? This is where it is, and that's my peace of mind too, because whether I'm highway superintendent or my previous career, I was always out working the event. I was never home with the family. So it's just easier to have the clear ability to tell my wife, this is where the supplies are, you're good. So I really kind of hope that we get other people thinking along those lines to be able to kind of prepare and understand what you might be facing. So just to touch on some Orient specific work that we've done in the last couple of years, we repaved the section of Old Main Road, Old Farm Road here down in the village. We've done major trimming along Old Road, Old Main Road, Youngs Road, Platt, Orchard, Tabor roads. We've done some hazardous tree removals along Youngs, Ryder Farm subdivision, all in that area. Some stuff along Narrow River Road, some big standing dead wood, and a few actually along Village Lane in partnership with PSEG on those. For this year, what I have basically on the look ahead, and this is something, a big push that I've put into partnering with our utilities. So you have really PSEG and National Grid are your two biggest out here. You have a couple little small areas on the private roads where Suffolk County Water has some pump stations. We have nothing to do up there, but National Grid is looking to do a gas main replacement project out on Youngs Road. So partnership with them, they'll be coming in and doing gas main. We've entered into pave agreements with these utilities, so we're actually going to be able to get money back to pave that road, resurface that road for everybody. Ahead of that, we did the tree trimming out there last year. We're going to be doing some additional trimming on King Street and some more select areas on Narrow River. And then once we kind of get leaves and foliage back on the trees here in the next few weeks, we'll be coming through and doing another assessment to see if anything died off over the winter or is of concern after the winter season here. We have a major drainage investigation that we're going to be undertaking up in Ryder Farm subdivision, a couple of roads up there that don't really have some great mapping as to what our records are. Some known issues up there. There's several small drainage areas that need some work, and there's a decent sized recharge basin up there that needs a little bit of work. And then we're working on our coastal resiliency mapping out for these low-lying areas, determine what we can do, where the impacts are going to be, if it's private impact or what it might be, and come up with some possible theoretical designs. So some of those areas that we've sort of delineated here in Narrow River Road, near Harbor Road, some challenges there with elevation and the neighboring properties being the state private properties there. Village Lane actually has a outfall pipe that's located down here near the yacht club. Those are a problem for a number of reasons. We don't want those from an environmental standpoint. Direct discharge right into the bay. We're actively and aggressively trying to eliminate those around town. The bigger challenge is you get these super high tides. It's an upwell point. That tide comes up. It doesn't need to breach the beach. It pushes right back through that structure and floods the road that direction. So something like that is a nice twofold thing for us. We're able to eliminate that discharge point to our bay, to our beautiful surface water body, And it also helps us from a coastal resiliency standpoint that now we raise the elevation that bay needs to overcome to come into the road. So we're looking at that. That's a big longer term, goal. That's a big goal. That's probably the single hardest outfall for us to cut in this entire town is that outfall. We have a lot of challenging situations here. We have a developed historic district. We have super low elevation of groundwater, but it's something that, is on our radar and we're looking at. Skipper's Lane here at the end of it. That's obviously a very well-known flooding issue. Another really tough one. What do we do there as a town? How many people does it impact? That's a tough one to solve without impacting private property. Several areas along Narrow River Road, and then another one which is an interjurisdictional issue, but I'm happy to say the state is working on it. Is 25 in Land's End over there by Orient by the Sea Marina. So they are, my understanding, I believe it is funded already. They will be reconstructing that entire thing at some point. There's a major outfall pipe that goes through the marina there. And we've worked with them and approved where they need to come into our road system to work and install drainage to work on all of their stuff to eliminate that outfall, which will help them tremendously. Over at Land's End, by Plum Island, Orient by the Sea Marina area there, right at that intersection. So when we get super high tides, the water backs through their outfall pipe into 25 and essentially cuts off the road there. It gets very deep. And it actually comes back into the Land's End neighborhood. So that's all going to be reconstructed and go to a leaching basin type system rather than a positive flow discharge system, which will be, that's great. I mean, that's a tremendous section of road. Right now it's positive flow. So in other words, stormwater comes into those basins, it goes right through a pipe directly into the marina. It's going to be going to a leaching pool system. So it'll be catch basins all piped together to leaching pools, which will recharge. And, the advantage to that is that rather than it being discharged to a surface water body, is it helps to recharge your aquifer. So it helps to bring that fresh water. It gets filtered through your sand, just like rainwater would, and recharges your aquifer. And those are the types of systems that we're installing when we eliminate outfall pipes. So it's sort of a nice twofold. Sure. Yep. So the question is, what state agency is it? That's New York State DOT. Yep. So that's a little bit of an overview of the highway department, and our sort of day-to-day work. Now, we monitor the weather quite literally. I probably check it at least 4 to 5 times a day. And we're constantly watching. I mean, you never know this time of year, notorious thunderstorms, things rolling through. But the thing though is that we're always in a state of preparation. We always have our chainsaws ready. Our machines are always ready to go. When they come back into the yard at the end of the day, everything's fueled and ready to go. And our staff members are, they're not on call, but they're there for us to call and they come back to work if needed. So in part of monitoring these weather conditions, if we have a big projected storm that is coming, we will pre-stage equipment in certain locations. So Orient Fire Department's kind enough to allow us usage of their parking lot. Big winter storm is coming. We may pre-stage a payloader and a large snow removal truck out there. Come out with our smaller truck. If the storm gears up, we switch over to that bigger piece of equipment. If a tree comes down, we have a payloader and an operator already here. It's a matter of getting a foreman out with a chainsaw. Bigger storm events come along, we might put 1 or 2 guys out here with chainsaws, a small road crew to be able to clear things out and bounce them around. Obviously, everybody knows cell phone communication can be kind of tough out this way. The highway department years ago used to have a low band radio system, very low frequency. It sort of fell apart and was unadopted with the advent of cell phones coming in. I've been in situations in my previous employment where there is no cell phone service. Having said that, we hopefully within the next month will have mobile radios back in the vast majority of our highway equipment, operating on a frequency that will be able to talk literally across the town from Peconic, from a command center, an office of emergency management, we'll be able to dispatch on command. That's tremendous. During winter storms, I'm in my office. We're monitoring the fire radio, the police radio, listening for EMS calls that might come through in the worst of the storm. Right now, we're relying on a cell phone to hopefully get in touch with that driver to say, hey, go make a push into this area so that they can get in and help this person out. Or if there's a windstorm, make sure that this route is clear if there's no trees in the road. So back to Don's point of communication, the highway department will have better communication than we've had in probably 10 to 12 years. Much more reliable than the low band as well. So that's something I'm very happy to say. That's going to help us out here tremendously. But the important thing to remember is if there's wires involved, if there's a major natural gas problem, something like that, we're very limited in what we can do. We need to have those relationships and those partnerships with those utility companies. And that's part of the reason why I've certainly been pushing. Al's really been helping out with this since the beginning of the year, partnering with these utilities and befriending them. Let's make them our friends. Let's provide them the place. Hey, you guys need a place to park trucks before a storm. This is something I started doing a couple of years ago, reaching out. Their municipal contacts will send out just a generic email blast to every town on the East End that their territory. And typically I'll call back from my personal cell phone number just to try it. That's their command center. Hey, I'm from Southold Town, just want to say hi. You guys need anything? We got a pot of hot coffee here. We got bathrooms. We got plenty of yard space to use our trucks. We're going to be ordering in food for the crew and have it here. You guys are more than welcome. Let me know. I'm just trying to get a head count. And sometimes they take us up on it and they'll pre-stage trucks out here. So the town, we've come a long way in sort of welcoming these guys in, and building the relationships not only with the leadership in those teams, but also the crew members. They want to come to Southold because they know we're going to help them out if needed. They know if there's a tree across the road and there's wires there, they're not going to be bucking it into small logs and moving it out of the way. They're going to de-energize the wire. The highway department's going to come with a payload or move the tree out of the road. They're a lot more willing to go and do that than sort of deal with a 36-inch tree across the road on their own, which is what other townships make them do. So there's a lot of ways that we can be prepared that are relatively simple and cost-free is my point. Sometimes it's just a friendly conversation, and hopefully that can extend people to their neighbors, and you guys can all kind of work together as the community that you are to really look out for each other and be prepared. It's really important to understand some of the challenges that we can potentially face. And I think in the last months in particular, we've been doing a pretty good job of communicating that to everybody. So at that point, I'll turn it over. If you guys have any more questions, I'd be more than happy to. Sure.
Well, thanks for having us here. This is, as you can see, the community is in very good hands here. It gives you a lot of confidence to hear what's going on, how concerned people are, and how much organization there is already. I'm Al Krupski, the town supervisor. I was county legislator the previous 11 years. Before that, I was on the town board for 7 years. And before that, I was a town trustee for 20 years. So I do know a lot of the different areas. And, Dan got into the flooding thing, and I'll just give a little history on that because that was near and dear to our hearts. Years ago, the DEC regulates shellfish closures and openings of our surface waters. And they do it based on bacteria. And bacteria mostly comes from either failing septic systems along the water or from stormwater runoff. Well, the DEC started to close some of our estuaries to, we have 22 creeks, started to close the creeks and part of the bays to shellfishing. This is back in the 80s and 90s. We got very concerned. Said, okay, we want to be proactive. What are we going to do to keep because then shellfishing was commercial enterprise. It's also residential. People want to go out and catch a clam, or scalloping was really big. And a lot of people are working on that now to see if that can come back. Big part of our economy, big part of our culture. So we started at Mattatuck Inlet and at Hashimamick, do it in bigger commercial shellfish grow out areas. And we had those mapped, the watersheds mapped. We did a tremendous, we started investing in drainage work. We worked with the county DPW on Hashmonack and on Matatuck Inlet. Town did a tremendous amount of work. As a result, we opened those areas up to shellfishing, some seasonally and some year round, over 200 acres extra. And then we worked on other creeks. We started with those two big ones, but we started to do that work on other creeks. Right here in Orient Harbor, you've got the biggest aquaculture operation, biggest oyster grower in New York State. And if the water isn't clean here in Orient Harbor, he's out of business. And they had a problem. Then Senator LaValle and I went to bat for him with the New York State DEC. We did not win. He had a problem with his operation because of the way the DEC was doing their sampling. Because they do the sampling and they do the testing. No one else, they'll take nobody else's results. But that's just a little history of how we really embarked on this drainage thing. At the time, there was very little concern about the aquifer because everyone, the pace of development there was plenty of water. Now everybody's got a lawn sprinkler system. So that whole water use changed over time and placed much greater demand on the aquifer. To Dan's point, he said, well, when we do all this drainage work, now instead of all those pipes that went into every road end and every creek and every bay and some into the sound, the highways were designed to drain all that stormwater into our estuaries because it runs downhill. It's the cheapest way to get it off the road. When you engineer solutions for that, so it doesn't go into and it carries not only the pathogens, but it carries sediment and it carries nutrients, excess nutrients. So you're eliminating that direct discharge into your estuaries, but you're recharging the aquifer. We didn't even think of that in the 90s when we really started focusing on this. Talk about a huge benefit because every waterfront home that gets redeveloped has a stormwater drainage plan. And plus, when you throw in the massive amount of stormwater that was designed to flow in there from the highway systems, oh, that's a lot of water. You get a 1-inch rainfall, that's a lot of water going right. It's like putting money in the bank. Dan's been super proactive working with the town engineer, dedicating a crew for drainage. So it's highway safety, it's recharging the aquifer, and it's water quality. It's really money well spent for our community. I just wanted to say that because when there's no ponding on the roadway, nobody notices. And when you can go out and you can swim in the beaches aren't closed, or you can catch shellfish or grow shellfish commercially. Everyone's happy. Nobody really notices. But that was a lot of work that went into that, and a lot of effort. And we talked a lot about government partners, and it is true. And these two men are very good communicators, and that's really what it takes, because you don't know what the next problem is going to be, but when you know people and you can pick up the phone and say, hey, can you give us a hand? We need this or that or the other. And they can call us and the same thing. So can you help out with something? So I think their communication skills are really very valued, and you can't overlook that like personal the personal element to all this. I was kind of sitting here listening to them, and I'm looking at the sky outside. It's a beautiful day. But their point, emergency preparedness, that's what you have to be prepared on a day like today, because when the storm comes, it's too late to really, and I don't know who made the point about sending the fire department out in the bad weather. We don't want to send the police department or the fire department. We don't want to put people at risk. Jane, you said it, if you can, don't be here in a bad weather event. If you have another place to go, the emergency management team, we're following this very closely. If there's a storm coming up the coast, we want people to not be here if they have an option. If you're going to be here because you have no option, know where you are. We are working on these maps. We started like January 3rd or something, working on these flood maps. Know where you are, and if your house now is being flooded on a regular area, or if your road's being flooded on a regular day when the wind's blowing out of the east, be prepared. You know, the tide will go out eventually. So make sure you have food, you have candles and actually it's being mentally prepared too. People can live a long time without electricity. You know, we're very used to all the conveniences. But, you know, during Sandy, we were out for a week. And afterwards, when the TV came on, we were like, why did we have the TV? We were happy without it for a week. You know, it was fine. And you can live very comfortably without it if you know things are going to get better eventually and return to normal. So I think a lot of it's mental that people, you should, you know, there's no one to call. If we have another big storm like that, the whole island's going to be a wreck. Nobody's going to come to your doorstep. So you really have to be mentally prepared to be comfortable to have no electricity. And if your neighbor has a can of tuna fish and you have a candle, that's dinner. You're going to have dinner, you know, and that should be okay because, you know, things will get better. And we do work with with a lot of people. We do work with, you know, Suffolk County DPW on the roads there. They're looking at, you know, there's a county study I was a part of a few years ago. Obviously, by Town Beach at Southold is very low, and it's not getting better at all. That beach is disappearing quickly. The county road's a major thoroughfare. It's got to be. It's like the causeway here. You know, you got to be mindful of that being overreached. The same with Matatuck Inlet County Road there. New York State DOT is got to be I think an important partner because I heard that the last storm that Dan referenced, it was flooded going into Greenport by Hashimomic. It's so low going through there. So I'm very encouraged. We have very good people here. To Don's point of training people for the shelters, it's really important. That hasn't, you know, I remember after Sandy, I was on the town board and the shelters were open, but they weren't. People go there as a last resort. So I think have the community engaged and say, okay, I know where I am. I know I can ride this out because my house is high enough. I'm not going to I'm not going to be waist deep in water on the main floor, right? If you know you got to be waist deep in water on the main floor, then you should seek shelter somewhere else. If you know you can ride it out and not have to drive somewhere during the storm or a day or two afterwards, because the roads are flooded or they're going to be blocked with trees and wires and whatnot. Just be ready, be prepared, and things will dry out eventually. But so yeah, I was very encouraged as supervisor. Head of the emergency management team, but believe me, I'm very encouraged because it's a very good team.
All right, so we're going to take questions for everybody. Please, gentlemen, because of Zoom, they can't hear the audience questions. Okay, go ahead.
They'll hear me. Okay, well, actually, I'm very impressed. For you, I'm sold.
Wonderful.
And I might bring my husband, and since tired now from that being said, I now have a 14-year-old, and about this, I think a lot about the kids. Going back to this, I would think that it would, because we have another young child. Oh, we've got a bunch of people. I just didn't see. To engage, have a youth division of the fire department and train them how important it is to volunteer for this. I think that fire department is so just having a 14-year-old in the house would, I would say, I take her to fold the newsletter at the church. Can I have a community service thing for my file so we can build that up and give them those that we have a much better chance of going to turn fire department, emergency management, are hitting youth in this house so that we not miss the next generation of volunteers that we're doing. Okay.
Well,
Can I respond to that right now? The fire departments historically have had juniors, and they come in at 14, 15, 16, whatever the particular department allows. They get some training. They are not allowed to participate in any rescues and fires because of their age. But they are becoming prepared. They're forming groups. Orient has not had many people in the last 10 years, many juniors. We've had so few juniors that we've combined with East Marion, and East Marion has had a joint junior program. It would be nice if there were enough juniors around to start up a program in Orient. I think it's probably more likely that we will continue with the joint program that's going on in East Marion.
Well, that's good. It's good to know they're in because now I have it in now with my 14-year-old. So she knows the whole community, knows a lot of the people. She now knows it's in Orient. She knows them in East Marion. So I think that, yeah, I can help that up if we want to get together and see what's going on because I know some.
that's great, Lorelei. Thank you, and thank you, Sue. I'm gonna turn it over to Barbara. Thank you.
Hi. Two questions. One is, could you talk about private roads? And I know that you're not mapping them for flooding, but how much maintenance and responsibility does the town take for private roads? And the other question is, could you talk about the difference between FEMA maps and slosh maps? Which slosh maps are hurricane, basically, maps. But could you talk about that a little bit and how aware people should be of those different maps?
So as far as the private road system, the town has no bearing at all on them. We do not do any maintenance. We have no responsibility for them. Once they are in and installed and operational, that's it. The only say that the town really has is when the subdivision plan and what the requirements are. But from a highway perspective, there is nothing to do with that. The private road networks, sort of had the challenge. Most of the historical ones, let's put it that way, have the challenge of no really hard and fast formal HOA or maintenance agreement as to, and this is an issue that I know the fire departments face, with their apparatus. They have large trucks, large expensive trucks, and these private roads, right, and these private roads tend to end up becoming narrower and narrower and narrower, and then a tunnel, and then finally so small that even maybe a deer can't get down it. That is not a problem until it's a problem, which is when somebody has a rescue or a fire or an automatic alarm or anything that's going on, and the fire department can't get down there. So I believe that the town is sort of looking through planning and some of the changes that you're looking to make in codes to try to discourage the usage and installs of private roads on subdivisions of certain sizes moving forward. And sure.
Everybody on traffic roads telling them that they are responsible to have their trees cut.
So
we don't get much of a response, but
yeah, so I mean, it's, I field a lot of questions, particularly from our newcomers that, we're sold a house on a private road. This is great. I live on a private road. We're going to have a lot of traffic, a lot less traffic. And then a snowstorm happens and you haven't plowed my road. Well, what road is it? We don't plow that road. What do you mean you don't plow that road? It's a road. It's in your town. Private road. We don't plow it. Oh, I got this pothole here. I have this tree here. Well, what do you mean? Who does this? Whoever you hire. Well, who hires that person? I don't know. It's, it's sort of this rhetorical kind of conversation that goes on. But yeah, that's, part of the preparation that we were talking about is if you do live on a private road, maintenance maintenance of that road is something, because there may come a time with a storm where there's trees across it, and that's it. You're gonna be on your own to kind of figure it out. You know, listen, if it were to come down to the private road, the chiefs of the fire departments all know how to get in touch with me. They said, hey, we got a real issue here. We got this problem. We got a payloader in the area. We're going to go move the tree to the fire department to get there. But on a normal, basis, you're going to kind of be on your own.
So I've lived there for 20 years, and I've paid to have that road plowed every year. Sometimes my neighbors will contribute, and sometimes they won't. And a lot of them thought the fire department was plowing, but they were not. Also had to go out myself or hire people to take care of the trees, because I knew they were going to come down in the next storm. If they're small enough, I go out and do it myself, or get a couple guys from the fire department to help me. So it's something that has to be faced, because if your insurance company knew that a fire truck couldn't get to you, whether it was a tree or a snowstorm, you would have a big problem.
So regarding the mapping, basically FEMA mapping, really more created for insurance companies more than anything. The slosh mapping is under storm events. Mapping that we're undertaking, like I spoke about, is for the storms that we face that are not storm events. They're not that tropical storm, hurricane level. These are your run-of-the-mill nor'easter that comes with the coast. We get 30 to 40-mile-an-hour winds that we're facing several times a year now. And these are the ones that are going to hit us more frequently, that we're living with several times a year at this point. And those are the ones that, they're a problem. They're a nuisance problem. Some of them are more serious than others, but those are the ones that we're trying to communicate to people that these are the conditions that you're going to face on a more regular basis. Those hurricanes, everybody takes seriously. You might get a nor'easter and people might expect them to be able to work on a Tuesday morning. This thing hits at midday on Monday. That might not be the possibility. Some of these homes, the home on the end of Skipper's Lane here, it becomes an island under these conditions. So we're just trying to communicate that to people and to know, all right, this road is flooded, or it's going to be flooded. This is the extent that it's going to flood to. I'm not even going to try to ford, this water. And it might seem dramatic, but you don't know, that road might have given way when that tide came in. There could be a submerged floating log or telephone pole there, and that car gets hung up on it, or something happens to it, and now we have to send, a police officer, a fire department personnel, a highway department guy, a tow truck guy to try to drag this car out. It's just that education of, this is what is going to happen under these circumstances. Getting that to you. Mind the barricades. If barricades haven't been able to get there yet because our resources are so limited, turn around and just go the other way. And really trying to get that information out. Just to your point real quick about the youth, one part that I see is the youth that's really powerful and important is the way in which they communicate. So obviously if we lose power, we lose cell phones, a major event happens, you're not going to have internet coverage. But all leading up to that, kids are on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. They're pushing these messages out. And that's where I see a lot of value in that youth, because everybody kind of picks up on it. You don't need to be a really computer savvy person, but if you go there and you have 150 kids all pushing, kind of sharing this information, it all gets out there. I'm on the older end of that generation, unfortunately, but I do have social media pages that I operate, and when we have storm events, I try to put stuff out there, and I've seen it just from 2.5 years ago. People share that, and I like to kind of look at the channels that where that information goes and how quickly that word travels. We try to put that good, useful, concise information out, what we're dealing with, see the situations that are unfolding, be mindful of it, and just kind of use that as an update until you can't anymore if the power were to go out. But I'd like to think it helps, but that's a good, powerful place that I think could potentially get involved and help us out.
Like to add something to the mapping question, because so we are working on the maps for the roads on town roads. We're trying to work with partners county and state, because obviously all those roads intersect. Did have all the fire chiefs in because we want to have a map that's available to all emergency rescue people. These roads flood. They're flooding now. They never used to flood 20 years ago. Now they're flooding on a regular basis. But there's an alternative. Go around the corner, go around the block. Yes, you're used to driving that way every day. You don't have to go. Don't if you don't have to, right? And that's the message we're trying to put out for the. As far as the other mapping that we're doing this. The town is doing massive zoning update, and as part of that, I've asked the planning department put those different FEMA maps as an overlay on the zoning districts, so that people know when they buy a home, they know what they're getting. If they're rebuilding the home, and as an old trustee, we got some bad coastal storms. It was a Halloween storm in the night. A lot of homes got flooded in the first basements got flooded. Everyone said, wow, that was a 100-year storm. A year and a half later, we had the Christmas Eve storm. Same thing, that wind blew out of the east. And that water piled up. There were bulkheads all over, pulled out all over the place. Same houses got flooded. After that, and I was a trustee, we sat with the DC emergency permit days. People elevated their homes. And we made sure the drainage was done properly so they weren't running water into the creek or into rainwater, right? But, so the elevation is really critical. RFI infrastructure is safe. You're going to spend the money, do it the right way, invest in it. So when the sun does come out, you just look at you're not worried about your furnace and all of your infrastructure, your wiring, but it's not necessary. So that kind of planning is going to be baked in.
There's 4 of us here from Narrow Road and Harbor. And we were talking before the meeting started about the flooding situation where the road is often now, this sunny day, high tide flooding as well as the storm flooding. And then with the construction of these 2 new houses has made the flooding situation a lot worse, and it comes in sometimes down the road into backyards and then to other people's yards. So it's really the whole section of the block now that's flooding. So we're trying to talk about working out a solution that the town, and correct me if I'm wrong, would raise the berm from the road end to King Street around the cemetery, the slaves burying ground, and us neighbors would work on the flooding that comes in through beach rights, which we haven't made much progress with trying to figure out who actually owns the beach rights. But we're working on that. And then some sort of way to shore up or to stop the flooding coming in on the beach rights, as a maybe schematic of at least a partial solution to the problem. But while the supervisor's here, I also wanted to mention something that's been on a lot of our minds for years, is the erosion that's happening on the beach from the end of Narrow Road to Pete's Neck, and the first breach that came in on Sandy, and now there's other breaches that are washing away that beach, and it's totally changed how the marsh there. It's like a 40-acre marsh there. The water into that marsh, and you may remember from when you were a trustee, always came in through Halleck's, and now it comes in right over the road, maybe right over the beach, comes in directly. So that, I think, is causing more water into the marsh and then over the, the low, the low edge of the road into the road and into the yard. And of course, you know, when you talk to the town, that's not, it's in Southold town, it's in Orient, but it's DEC property. So then I began wondering, like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, with a lot of money that's been available under the Environmental Bond Act, and went to a meeting that the DEC had further in about, you know, potential uses for the money. You know, I mean, is there, and this is a longer range problem, but is there a possibility of the DEC, of the town working with DEC so that Pete's Neck, I mean, that marsh and all that isn't permanently lost? I mean, we've been out here since we bought our house in '74, and remember what the bay was like. I mean, it was just full of life. We had you know, I mean, clams are pretty even gone, but there were scallops, there were eels. I mean, it was terrific, you know, and that's all gone now. And it would, I think, I mean, we have our concern about the flooding, but I think it would be a shame to lose the marsh and not make some effort to try to do something about what was one of the richest marine life, you know, out here.
Yeah,
If it could be somehow be restored.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I'll talk to the town trustees. I was very active for years with the County Partnership, and there, you know, what's happened is all of our infrastructure, whether it's a private residence road, it stopped the natural progression of marsh migration. Sea level rise is taking place fast rate, but the marsh can't even migrate that quickly. It can't react because it's a salt environment versus fresh water environment. So it's having trouble. Like nature can't even keep up with that. A lot of marine species have changed. A lot of bird species, they say, are changing their range of habitat. The grass, as far as the marsh grass, hard for them to taste that level of salt and fresh water. I'll take it. No, but I know Greenport Ferry, the North Ferry here, they had to raise both landings bonds to sea level rise because
South, the Gulf area, which has had sea level rises of up to 8 inches in the last 10 years. And they only were on their map, only showed up to like New Jersey or Chesapeake Bay or whatever. But there they were talking about 3 inches. So I'm sure, you know, we're in a similar situation, which is exacerbated by the fact that we have east winds and bays.
Yeah, and that increased so that you get the fresh water that drains out into the salt water at low tides, and you see it everywhere. Low tide. So if the salt water goes up, it means the fresh water is going up with it. So you see groundwater coming up. Anecdotally, it's easy.
Sorry. I just have a quick question. Building on what Carolyn said and talking about what we've been talking about with Dan and Michael Collins and the flooding at Narrow River and Harbor, our issue right now, because we know that the town has, you know, been great supporting, wanting to do what's right, private landowners, we're trying to figure it out. The missing piece is DEC. And we are not having any luck. We don't know how to get them engaged to do their part, to just berm up around what is a parking lot, which wasn't ever supposed to be a parking lot, to augment what the town would do.
Seriously, call my office. I have good contacts with the.
And it would be helpful too if you could be involved. It would. Thank you.
I'd be happy to do. They've been good partners on a lot of different projects.
Yeah, Bart, I think then Mary.
Yeah, regarding that location, I'm not sure how much there was some stormwater mitigation done there, and I'm not sure how much that helped because it broke through the berm.
Those systems that are there or something, those are ones that, you know, I mentioned systems that were installed that are no longer appropriate. the one basin that's there actually upwells water at normal tides, because it's
Yeah.
set at an elevation that is essentially where the tide comes into.
But I think that was done fairly recently.
Yeah, well, I won't talk about it.
Okay.
You have it.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah.
So another question is there a timetable for addressing the stormwater on Village Lane? And I think there's like a connection between the stormwater on Village Lane, that like at the end of Navy Street, at the end of Skippers, because everything's flowing down towards it. I mean, it's not just coming up from the bay, it's also a lot of stormwater that's draining there.
Yeah, so what you have to understand about all of our stormwater techniques that we use in town, they all rely on gravity. So water is a level seeking material. So if the bay is at an elevation that's equal to the elevation of where your roadway is, which is exactly what happens here, where Village Lane is slightly depressed than the neighboring properties because the road is in. Those two things can be at the same elevation. Positive flow system, your bay that you're trying to discharge to is at the same elevation of the water that you're trying to discharge. It's just not going to move until that goes there. There's actually an outfall system that was cut at the end of Navy Street years ago. I believe has been reestablished by a private property owner, that we have to investigate and see what's going on there. And then the end of Skipper's Lane, there are no drainage structures down there. What we would propose doing in a situation like that would be to install some stuff up the hill further away from the water's edge, where we have a bit more elevation to work, 5 to 6 feet of elevation, capture what we can at that point, install a sandy swale at the bottom to allow it to recharge naturally.
Dan had mentioned Village Lane before, and he had mentioned Village Lane before as a challenge, and I know the town's looked at it over the past 2 decades. You know, any kind of direct discharge was like a priority. But if you can fix 10 different discharges, that's why Village Lane never got done, because it's so, you know, so engineering.
Yeah, the resources, both from an engineering perspective and a financial project like that, are tremendous. It would need to be sole capital project that the town would put together. A lot of the challenges there are the tightness and room that you actually have to install things in gas and Village Lane, so that limits where we road underneath the asphalt that's there. Have sidewalks on some of both of it, and at the end of this, we're going to have to do a full-on paving restoration, and it's going to disrupt this area for months while this goes on. Which obviously years ago would have been a huge deal to do in the winter. It's not ideal construction season for that sort of disruption and restoration. But, you know, when we come through and pave a road now, if that road has sidewalks adjoining, all those sidewalks need to be brought to current ADA standards. So what does that mean? It means that we have to put in passing panels. We have to put in detectable warning pads at intersections. We have to come across the commercial driveways with sidewalk. And two things that don't really get together well, maybe a little bit better than oil and water, are sidewalks and trees, unfortunately. Trees do not like sidewalks. So, you know, to take on a sidewalk project on Village Lane, essentially going to be removing almost every single tree along. All of that concrete is going to have to be, it's going to be a major uprooting because of the elevations. When we go in and we repave a road townwide now, we're looking our standard that we're looking every 5 to 700. So it's sort of like you have your sandwich for lunch. You eat that sandwich a bite at a time. We break that water flow up on that road. You know, that road might be 1,500 feet straight downhill. We're not just going to put one system at the bottom. We break that road up into bites that's manageable size. Village Lane, due to our elevation, it's going to be broken up into sections that might be 100 feet long. We need to capture that stormwater every little bit at a time because that's all the capacity that we have. We have to build the systems with capacity to handle that stormwater on a 2-inch design storm, because going away from positive flow, you fill that and it's not recharging that fast. Now you have a flooded road. Obviously not anything we want. So this is going to be a major for us to finally get this one. But it's one of the more complicated issues.
My name is Mary Dorman. I live at the Point, and I do want to thank you all for your good work and for coming here. And I love and I forgot what the word was that you used about hyperlocal. I like that. I think sweatshirts would be good. Hyperlocal orient. Anyway, I disagree with you a little bit about buddy with PSEG and the other utilities out here who are commercial, as you know, and who I believe we pay premium price for. So but I like the coffee and the actual workers and relying on them and having a rapport with them. I do not know why the utility lines on the causeway are falling down in front of our eyes. They're being held up by cables. They're going to go momentarily. That's going to be a problem for these commercial companies that are making a lot of money off of us out here because it's a monopoly as far as I'm concerned. We don't have any choice. And they're going to go. So we had this conversation with Supervisor Russell a couple years ago. And he said to me, Mary, it's impossible. The bedrock, the this, that, the revetments, we did this, we studied this, it's going to cost billions of dollars. No way we've had a study done. Well, that study I retrieved was done in the mid-'80s. And it was a study of 2 possibilities of sinking the utility lines on the causeway here and sinking utility lines in the village of Amagansett. They were lobbying to have those lines sunk solely for aesthetic purposes. Those lines were sunk. This is our lifeline here. They're going to go. And the one that's healing over now is absurd.
2 days ago.
Well, I saw 3 trucks out there. It was fixed momentarily.
No. There's a new pole.
A new pole, how long? I mean,
It's actually vertical.
the whole pole's gone. It's super loaded with a lot of, they're going to go. They are going to go. And so my appeal to you is to give us a good reason why they should not be sunk. And therefore, we don't have to look at them or worry about it.
I mean, I do have a good relationship with SCNG. I did come out to meet and greet, and I had a lot of make it a tourist attraction. But they assured me that they would fix it, that they knew about it. And that, they don't want to emergency. They've been doing since Sandy. They've spent a lot of our money. They've spent a lot of time, effort, and money on hardening the system, not only tree trimming, but replacing a lot of the older poles. You don't notice it when you go by because you're driving. But if you look at some of the poles, they were really desperate need of replacement. They've done a job.
Well, why can't we sink the lines?
So as far as that goes, as far as Amagansett, they were supposed to form a special district there because it was aesthetics. The people who would benefit from that pay that cost over time on the utility. I think you're in the Park District. To this, we had the conversation with the utility. It had to be 2010-ish, and then they assessed the cost and they said, like, why they don't run the train to Greenport? Because it's cost of service there. Got a big system. They didn't want to do it.
The grant money or
I don't know. I honestly don't know how that could be considered, maybe now for storm resilience, maybe that's the right way to approach that.
That's
The New York State bond money, no one's seen a dime of it yet.
I think that's the second project that you need to get started on is the combination, I think, of raising the causeway and burying the lines simultaneously.
Well, elevating the causeway would make it's armored. And years ago, that was fine. The armoring was fine, and it held up quite well. Making them park there, try to keep that road open. Talk about a monumental effort. Park on. So to elevate that, you'd have to look at both sides and see how far back you want to raise the causeway on the side. But raising the road is like everyone raised their houses. Burying the lines would be. And when you talk about interstate traffic, that would be a good, again, it's our partner in New York State Department of Education. They would be the partner there. They've got challenges all over. The road's slow.
Okay, we've been going for a little bit. Lorelei has a question, and if it's okay, that's going to be the last question. So, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Chris, and then Lorelei, and then we're going to let you guys go home. Okay, Chris.
Thanks. I'm also a resident of Harbor Road, and I guess we are wondering what would be the path, if there is one, to berming that area that floods so frequently to try to keep the water out in the first place. Is that potentially a path to making everyone a little bit safer in storms?
So that's going to certainly be a portion of the solution. Another portion to collect that water area there. It doesn't impact anybody possible. My biggest concern with berming it is how high do you build the berm and in what circumstances hold, because at some point, whether it's 5 years from now or 500 years from now, it's going to be breached. And then what does that look like after that?
It looks like a pond.
Well, that whole area needs to be looked at.
It comes in one. The only place I can imagine is on
that's an area where
the beach access.
Well, that's exactly right. That road there is one where private properties are going to have to be involved with whatever sort of resiliency project goes on, because that berming, that hardening at that point, that elevation change needs to take place on the seaward side of all of those properties.
No, my question is, where do you even start? And I know the DEC has something to do with it in the town, the trustees do, but I mean, where do we start?
I mean, you start at the lowest point. It's sort of, as our thought process as we continue down this journey of doing these mappings. The mapping is the initial phase of it, and determine what the low-hanging fruit are. Go out from there and come up with engineering designs for each of those. Easiest, most beneficial to the toughest.
To Village Lane.
We would have to. It would be all part of. If we were to take that on as a project, it would have to be that entire area.
And we're
sure. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Correct. Yeah, the narrow river harbor intersection is the low spot of those 4 roads.
And this is all over town. We're faced with the whole town line.
Well, that's where our plan is going to come, is basically like, look, this is what we identified as a project. This is what we're proposing as a fix, but it's going to require the partnerships of X, Y, and Z to make this happen. And if we have those partnerships, it's a non-starter, basically.
It's,
from the get. I mean, we would essentially develop the plan, would be my opinion, and then cost of the construction is going to be, that's going to have any private property construction.
and, well, and that's what, as far as the private property part goes, and I'm not an engineer, but I do know that if you raise one part, you have a storm event with rainfall, or whether it's from, from coming in from the bay, you block that water flow, it's gonna, in many cases, it's gonna have an impact on neighboring properties. So that makes it very complicated for some of these projects, how that water flow is gonna be. Sorry, but yeah, it's very complicated.
Okay, you ready? Okay, well, actually, my main concern for coming here today will be to our middle guy, but Mr. Krupski, I want to say thank you for mentioning Southold Town Beach, because I drive by there all the time and I won't pull in. My background is in environmental science, so I'm not without some knowledge of all the power of water, but to me, that whole thing is being undermined. I won't even pull in to the parking lot. That's a disaster. It's always flooded. It's an eyesore to the town, even for me to look at it. But that being said, I'm glad someone's looking at that, because I'm just afraid it's all undermining underneath and it'll just like fall in.
Changed a lot in my life.
Yeah. So anyway, now my street, North Sea Drive in Orient by the Sea, someone from the town was just down there. Is my little problem, is this problem on Harbor and Narrow River is much bigger than mine. But I've been kind of poo-pooed in my idea. My property on North Sea Drive has a right-of-way. Okay, I'm the only one in the development that has this right-of-way through to the other street. Now, I had a big clump of stuff killing my trees, the ivy and everything else. My husband and I cleared that all out because it's killing the trees and everything there. It just sucks all the sap out. Well, there's 4 watershed properties in my community. 2 are active. 1 says the town is going to be activating, I think, in the next couple of years. And the one across from me is not activated. But the town is now addressing that we're getting flooding there. Okay, but to me, acting as some place that's supposed to collect water, these vines are sucking the life out of everything in there. And the vines so much have creeped into the trees on the neighbor's property. I had to report to him, his tree, big, huge Christmas pine tree, was almost dead because the vines have come in and he had to pay his landscaper to take them. What I'm thinking is that, and I know it's like a time, money project, this is important, but we need to clean those out. We need to get those vines out of there. I sit on my front porch watching the trees die every day. Those are what needs to hold the water. Those vines are just sucking water, sucking sap. It makes the community like ugly. I've even offered to say, hey, can we as a community go in and clean it out? And the town says no, because it's liabilities and all of that. But
we have over 150 large basins.
Right.
Have over 200 large parents.
Right,
that were reserves on subdivision.
You know, I took some pictures. Like if I didn't tell the gentleman, because he comes in this way, he doesn't see his tree, and I'm like, those vines from the town property are killing your tree. I mean, you could have people coming in and say, town replaced my tree because you didn't maintain. You know, it's actually encroaching. So I cleared my area, and I just hate to see trees that we can keep, that we don't have to cut down, being killed by this invasive species. Plus, it's like ugly. So anyway, that's my saying. I hope you help. I have pictures.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it. I just want to thank you all so much for coming today. You did a great job. Yeah. All right, so we're going to end everything. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.